Call to order the Finance Committee meeting of Monday, August 9th, 2021, and I'll ask Dave to call the roll, please.
Council President Abbas.
Present.
Alder Carter is delayed. Alder Verveer is absent.
I'm actually here.
Oh, you are. Good to see you, Alder Verveer.
Well, you can't see me. I can't enable the video. I'm on Martha's Vineyard.
Well, good to hear you. Are you present?
Pardon me?
Are you present, Alder Verveer?
Yes, I'm present for at least part of the meeting, Dave. Thank you.
Okay, yep. Alder Furman?
Present.
Alder Figueroa Cole?
I am present, and I don't know why I cannot enable my video either. I may have to change computer.
Okay. And Alder Curry?
Here.
Mayor, you have quorum.
Thank you. Can we have the meeting instructions, please? Stefan, for some reason, we're not hearing you.
I'll go ahead and read the instructions for now.
Thanks, Joe.
Welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members, if you're able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you're able, please activate your video when you are speaking. All panelists, that is alders and staff, have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. Please continue to use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak. The name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the body, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Mayor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I don't see any general public comment on our agenda or on our list today, so we'll go to disclosures and recusals. Are there any disclosures or recusals by members of the body? President Abbas?
Yes, I would like to recuse myself from, just give me, Madam Mayor, 1 second to me. Agenda item number 6, file number 66667.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dave will note you as recusing on number 6. Alder Curry?
Thank you, Mayor. I would ask to be recused from legislative file 66682, agenda item 23.
We'll note you as being recused on item 23. Are there any other disclosures or recusals on today's agenda? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. And just to start, item 1 is an appointment. We have a registrant wishing to speak on item 15. And then item 24 is our closed session. And item 25 is a presentation from staff. So those items will be excluded from the consent agenda. Are there other, or let me tell you before I go on that on item 16, we have folks from the Urban League here in support, available to answer questions. On item 20, we have folks from Luna's Moving Out and Rural Enterprises in support, available to answer questions. And on item 21, we have someone from CAC here in support, available to answer questions. So if you wanted to ask any of those folks questions, you could ask for any of those items to be excluded from the consent agenda. Are there items that you would like to have excluded from the consent agenda, Alder Furman?
Thank you, Mayor. I would like item number 20 excluded from the consent agenda.
Item number 20. Are there additional items that alders would like excluded from the consent agenda? All right, seeing none, then we will have excluded from the consent agenda item 1, item 15, item 20, item 24, and 25. President Abbas, a motion, please.
Motion to adopt consent agenda.
Alder Furman, would you second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt the consent agenda with those exclusions and the appropriate recusals. Is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote other than the recusals in favor of the consent agenda? Seeing no objection, we'll record that vote. And so for folks that were here registered on items other than 15 and 20, your item has passed through the Finance Committee and you are free to go. Ditto for staff. And we'll go to item number 1, which is Legistar 66638. And I'm delighted to submit for your approval the appointment of Matt Tucker for confirmation of a 5-year term as the Building Inspection Division Director. Matt is here if you have any questions for him. But first, President Abbas, a motion.
Move motion to appoint Matt Tucker for confirmation of a 5-year terms as a Building Inspection Division Director.
Alder Furman?
Second.
Thank you. Been moved and seconded. Are there any questions for Mr. Tucker? Alder Figueroa Cole.
I don't have a question. Just want to say congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Seeing no questions, then, is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor of confirmation? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of confirmation. Congratulations, Tucker. On to the next. All right, so that will take us then to item 15. Item 15 is Legistar 66593, amending the police department's 2021 operating budget to accept various grants. We have one registrant here, Kim Richmond of District 16, in support, wishing to speak.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and committee. Amending MPD's 2021 budget to receive the grant money is really a no-brainer. It's free grant money that MPD could use for overtime expenses and their community engagement priorities on their strategic plans, and in addition to other important priorities. Doesn't cost us taxpayers anything. This grant would compensate for all the overtime pay that MPD is accumulating because of being understaffed. In addition, several retirees are taking pay instead of comp time. Not accepting this grant would continue to put a strain on the MPD budget. In addition, we work together with Dane County Sheriff's Office to combat drugs, specifically opioids, pardon me, and that's affected us all. We've accepted this grant on behalf of the task force because of our volume of drug-related incidents. Thank you for your time and have a good evening and be well and stay safe.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Kim? All right, seeing none, then President Abbas, a motion on item 15.
Move motion to adopt the amending MPD operating budget of 2021.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there questions or is there discussion? Alder Figueroa Cole.
I'm sorry. Is there any matching funds required for these grants?
That's a good question. Assistant Chief Patterson or Teague?
There is no match required.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Any additional questions or discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of item 15? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote on item 15. And we will go to item 20, which is Legistar 66789, amending some resolutions approving a development agreement on Truman Olson. And on item 20, we have here Miriam Maldonado of District 10 in support, available to answer questions. Megan Schutz of District 15 in support, available to answer questions, representing moving out. And Brandon Rule from Milwaukee in support and available to answer questions. Are there questions for any of those folks? All right, seeing none. President Abbas, can we get a motion, please?
Move motion to amend various resolutions as well as approving a development agreement for sale and redevelopment of 1402 South Park Street.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there questions for staff?
Mayor, I do have questions for staff.
Go ahead, Alder Furman.
Thank you. I was hoping to get a little bit more background on where this valuation came from and see if there's any more details that can be shared on. I know it sounded like we're going to search for some different options, so the city doesn't own this, necessarily long term, but see if there's any more information that can be shared about that.
Right, so I think probably we have Dan Rolfs and Matt Miklajewski and Kevin Ramakrishna here. Who wants to take a stab at the Alder's question?
I can take a stab at it, unless Matt really wants to. The valuation is not something that we have had appraised separately. The way this is working is the $4.6 million is part of the capital stack for the developer. It is their cost of construction of that white box. So there's no separate valuation. I mean, we can walk through, I guess, their numbers and try to reduce it, but we're really too far past any real ability to bring those costs down. I don't really know that there would be any way to bring the cost down. Basically, all you're buying is the cube of air inside the walls that will be a grocery store. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, it sounds like, it sort of is what it is what I'm hearing. I mean, it's interesting to me that it does cost more than the property that we're possibly going to sell for Judge Dell Square Hotel. We're spending more on this than we're getting for that. So that was sort of an odd number to me to see that grocery space is costing more than the land that we're selling for for a future hotel. But I get where we are in the process, so I appreciate that. Then my other question then is just related to what the long term, what can be shared about long term vision for the ownership of this property or condo or whatever it is.
Yeah, the long term is to keep moving towards getting a grocery store in there, and right now Luna's is still the best candidate. We are working with Mariam to continue to put together this deal. Part of the issue, and I think it says so in the resolution, I apologize, I'm just coming back from vacation. So I'm jumping in here. But what it says is, she needs more time to sort of put together how her financing structure is going to work. And that's getting her lender comfortable as well. So it's a very tricky financial deal to put together because the real estate is relatively secure, but the actual business operation is not as secure. And that's not anything that should surprise anybody. Operating a grocery store in this area is obviously very difficult. And if it were easy, obviously there would be a price, what do they call it? A pick and save, staying in the area. That's just not the case. So putting this together is going to be a little bit more difficult. It's going to take a little bit more time. I think Alder Evers is very convinced about the viability of a grocery store in this area and that it will be a future success. And so the plan is to get a grocery store into this location before the city has to shell out $4.6 million, right? That's the ideal scenario. If that doesn't happen, though, we need to be there as a backstop to make sure that we get this 150 affordable units built and figure out how to get a grocery store in there at some point.
Matt, did you want to add anything?
Nope, I think Kevin did a great job of laying out where we're at today.
Any additional questions for staff?
Mayor, just a further clarification, and we shouldn't necessarily expect that we're going to see, reimbursement of the 4.6, possibly just chunks of it. I mean, I know we obviously one of the nice things that was clear from this is obviously we had another financial commitment that's getting pushed into this. So it's not, a new 4.6 million commitment, but at some point, I guess, working through this complicated process, what is our goal? Besides, obviously, the important part about having a supermarket there.
Matt, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, I'd be happy to, Alder. I think realistically, there's 3 possible scenarios that are going to occur relative to the 4.6 million. The first is, as Kevin indicated, we find a path forward to work on a financial package that works for Luna's or another grocery that Luna's or another grocery purchases the condo for the full $4.6 million, and we are entirely reimbursed. Realistically, given the challenges around a grocery in this location, that's probably not the most likely scenario. So then the second scenario would be that we're paid something for the grocery store's space from the grocery that ultimately locates there. So under that scenario number 2, we'll get paid something and we'll be able to reimburse ourselves for a portion of the 4.6 million, recognizing that a portion may need to go into the transaction as a city subsidy. And then the third scenario is that the city or possibly the CDA, which we could transfer to the CDA later, retains an ownership interest in the store and leases the space to a grocer. So those are probably the 3 scenarios. We sell it to someone for 4.6 million, we sell it to someone for a value less than 4.6 million, or we retain ownership and lease to a grocer.
Alder Harrington McKinney, questions for staff?
Question for staff. Thank you very much for allowing me to ask this question. In your, as you're describing finding a pathway to achieving the financial package, the financial deal, and the complexity of that, is there any time constraint that you're looking to put this package together? And my second question is, really 3 questions. The activities that's going into supporting Luna's to be able to put that packaging together, are we almost there? Is there a projection of time in the factor? And something that probably is not comfortable to ask is that at what point Is it where the consideration for opening up possibilities for others to step in? Thank you.
So I can.
And when I say others, I mean to consider other other entities to step in.
Mayor, should I go ahead? Thank you, Alder, and my other colleagues. If you have want to follow up, please do. So in terms of timeline, the city is not going to be required to purchase this condo unit until after construction is complete. And so that's over a year into the future. So our goal is to really have the final financial package pulled together by that time, so that potentially it's not actually us buying the condo after construction is completed, that we will transfer those rights over to another entity, such as Luna's Grocery, to do so, or that happens kind of simultaneously with closing. So our real goal is, by the time the construction of the condo unit is complete, that we've identified that financial package to move a grocer into that space. In terms of sort of looking at other options, we continue to have a very good working relationship with Luna's Groceries, and are still looking at that as our first option. That being said, though, and this won't come as a surprise to Luna's Groceries, we do recognize the importance of having a grocery store in the neighborhood, and we are going to be keeping an eye out for some possible Plan B options as well. Because as much as we want to see Luna's Groceries succeed, we also know that we have a grocery store in that location. And so it is something that we are going to start exploring possible other avenues just to have as a Plan B.
Thank you, Matt. Alder Wahilihi.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Matt, thank you for laying out the three scenarios. And my question to you is, number one, if you can elaborate more on scenario 2, where the city will be paid partial of the reimbursed partial of the cost for this project. And also, is Luna's Grocery part of all the three scenarios? So if you can just elaborate more on scenario 2, and also if Luna's is part of those three scenarios. Thank you.
Sure. Luna's, in our conversations with Luna's is working with a private lender. So Luna's does have some opportunity to put together a financial package to purchase the condo and to complete the build out and open the store. And so the question becomes kind of what is sort of the maximum capacity that Luna's Groceries would have for loans to service for capital costs. So in other words, as Luna's is opening in the space, they're going to have financial needs on the capital side, so the purchase of the condo, the build out of the condo space, and then they're going to have operating needs to get the grocery store up and running. And there's a certain threshold with which they can't exceed. And so under scenario number 2, over the next year, as we continue to work with Luna's and work with Luna's lender, we're going to need to have a conversation about what is sort of that threshold and what type of city subsidy might be needed to fill that gap between what Luna's can afford to pay and that $4.6 million. And yes, it is a potential for Luna's to be really part of either 2 or 3. I mean, I think we already know that it's going to be a challenge for Luna's to pay $4.6 million for the condo. That's why we're here today, is because that has become a challenge. So I think it's to be fair, it's if we continue down the path working with Luna's, They're probably not going to be able to afford the full 4.6 million, but I think the hopes would be that there's some level of compensation that we could identify.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Thank you, Matt. Any other questions for staff on this item? All right, seeing none. It has been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing no discussion, is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor of item 20? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of item 20. And that takes us to item 24, which is our closed session item. President Abbas, a motion and the notification to move into closed session on item 24, please.
Sure. Move motion for the closed session for the purpose of discussion of potential property acquisition and finance structure related to addressing homelessness.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded.
Yep. And the statement is closed session. When the finance committee considers the following matter, it may go into the closed session pursuant to section 19.811E, which reads as follows: deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public businesses whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. If the finance committee does go into closed session, notice is hereby given pursuant to section 19.852 that it may reconvene in open session without waiting 12 hours as specified in the statute.
And in fact, in this case, we will reconvene in open session to get our presentation on number 25. So it has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, no, as your name is called. And I'll ask Dave to call the roll.
Council President Abbas.
Aye.
Alder Carter, I think is still absent. Alder Verveer.
Aye.
Alder Furman.
Aye.
Alder Figueroa Cole.
Aye.
Alder Curry.
Aye.
Mayor.
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Thank you. So we are moving into closed session. I'll ask staff to facilitate that, and any staff that were here on other items besides item 24, we'll ask you to please leave the Zoom. Thank you. So we're coming out of the closed session of the Finance Committee. During that closed session, we discussed possible property acquisitions related to addressing homelessness on multiple fronts. That conversation to be continued. And so having dispensed with item 24, we'll go on to item 25 on our agenda, which is the second quarter projection analysis for our 2021 operating budget. And Dave, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully I'll move through this.
Coming out of the closed session of the Finance Committee, during that closed session, we discussed possible property acquisitions related. Somebody's on lag. Addressing homelessness on multiple fronts. That conversation to be continued. And so having dispensed.
Dave, do you have anything going on in the background there?
Hang on a second.
The second quarter projection.
I think I fixed it now. So.
I love hearing myself speak.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries.
All right. So, yes, the second quarter outlook, and we'll turn to that right away. We will cover the general library fund in particular, so projections by agency, as well as the enterprise agencies, and then we'll preview the mid-year appropriation resolution, which includes allocating some of the American Rescue Plan Act funds and the strategy associated with addressing some of the deficits. All right, so focusing on the general library fund first, in this table, that first line that says general fund revenue, we're now projecting that will be almost 4 million short of the estimates made for the 2021 budget. Much of that is driven by the room taxes, and we'll get into the details of that on the next slide. Property taxes remain unchanged. Agency revenues, so those are revenues that go directly to agencies and offset general fund spending. Those are expected to be short by almost 800,000. However, on the bright side, expenditures are expected to come in under budget by close to 4.4 million. So taken together, we're expecting a small deficit of a little under $300,000. Now, just a reminder that the 2021 budget is balanced by using $8 million from our fund balance, also known as our rainy day fund. And this projection assumes that what's left in the contingent reserve, so that's appropriation that we set aside in each budget, and the amount that's still in there is a little under $1.7 million, remains unused for the rest of the year so that we can allocate it for other purposes, and in effect, that'll offset some of that revenue shortfall. So, in terms of general fund revenues, like I said, room taxes are expected to fall about 4 million short of projections, and the general fund impact of that is about 1.3 million. The remainder of that affects the room tax fund and associated allocations made by the Room Tax Commission. In the 2021, the remaining general fund revenues, ambulance conveyance fees, even with the fee increase that was included in the 2021 adopted budget, are expected to both fall a little over 800,000 short of budget. Parking violation revenues still remain very weak. Again, not much activity occurring, particularly downtown in areas that are parked with meters or in the garages. And that's expected to be almost 900,000 below budget. On the bright side, building permit revenues are quite strong and expected to finish almost $900,000 above budget. I won't go into a lot of detail on this, but this does give you the background by agency and the reasons for either being slightly over in some cases, over budget or under budget. A lot of it is driven by salary savings, so that might be the timing of filling positions. Some of it might be renegotiated contracts. Some deficits might be occurring due to revenue coming up short of what was estimated in the budget. There's also what we're seeing also in the agency budgets is savings from the work share plans that were implemented in January and February of this year and March as well. So some of that's being picked up in the agency budgets, but a lot of it is positions that have been vacant, turnover occurring, and so on. And then some of the cost overruns are due to agencies have to pay out for retirees who may have sick leave balances, and then we address those appropriation imbalances later in the year. Fire, however, has a major deficit, and we'll touch on that in a minute. And then as does Parks, which is really due to their agency revenues coming in short as the activity there is not picking up as quickly as what was anticipated due to COVID. So again, as I said, most agencies have a surplus. A lot of that's due to vacancies and work share. Fire is projected to be over budget by almost $2 million. And that's even though their salary line, their permanent salary line is expected to be under budget. Overtime is over $2.25 million higher than budget. And that's due to absences running higher than what was projected, 8 per day versus 6.7. There's a high use of emergency paid leave. And so that's contributing to that deficit in fire. Police, on the other hand, is expected to be slightly under budget, about $400,000. They did implement furloughs in the first quarter, and that did generate savings. Overtime is slightly over budget, but again, some of that is conversion of compensated time to pay, some critical incidents, and so on. And then some of their benefits are over budget again due to compensated absence escrow payments. So those are again payments of sick leave or other leave balances to retirees. Turning to the non-general fund agencies, this just gives you a sense of where the year-end projection will be for those. A negative number is actually a good thing. That means that revenues will exceed expenses. And so CDA housing and redevelopment, fleet, golf is expected to have a slight deficit, but that's much better than what it has been in the past, although not as good as 2020, where the only thing they could do was golf. Metro expected a slight surplus. Monona Terrace, again, is still heavily affected by COVID. It is recovering, but it will have a pretty significant deficit to finish fiscal 21, as will parking. So those are the two areas that have been most heavily affected by the pandemic. And then public health will have a significant surplus, and that reflects the federal dollars that have come in for COVID-related activities to pay for staff that have been reallocated from other activities, and then that generates surplus of sort of own source city and county money that's in the public health department. Sewer, storm, and the water utilities are all expected to finish with pretty sizable balances at year end. So just some of the highlights. Again, parking is not recovering as quickly as what was anticipated in the budget. Their revenues are on the charges for service side expected to be about $800,000 below budget, while their license and permit revenues, so that's some of their putting bags on meters, those activities are slightly above budget. Fleet is seeing a large surplus, primarily from vehicle sales, and that's because, as you probably read, it's hard to purchase new vehicles now because of shortages in chips. Golf courses, they'll have a surplus on the revenue side, and the sewer utility does have some higher than budgeted charges. They're still projected to finish the year with a surplus, and I explained the public health situation. All right, so that's the background on taking all of our actuals through the first and second quarters and then projecting them to year end and where we think we'll be. Turning now to the mid-year appropriation. So that's a resolution that'll be introduced at the end of August, and we've done this the last few years. This one will be a little more involved just because of deficits we're trying to address, use of the ARPA funding, as well as use of the TID 25 surplus, which we've referenced in previous meetings. So first, looking at the background on the ARPA money, as you recall, the city is getting $47.2 million from the state and local coronavirus relief and recovery funds. Of that amount, $22.8 million has been allocated for community investments. You have seen that resolution. The council has adopted that resolution with some of that funding being appropriated in the 2021 budget, with more to be appropriated in the 2022 budget. The remaining $24.4 million is for revenue replacement and maintaining government services, and that's what we're focusing on with this mid-year appropriation. In addition, Tax Increment District 25, which has been in existence since 1995, it's been dissolved. Again, the council just adopted a resolution to dissolve that TID. There will still be one additional year of increment for affordable housing, and that'll occur in tax year 2022. That's collected in 2023. But it is anticipated there'll be $30 million of residual revenues in that TID, and that's divided among the various taxing jurisdictions. So the school district, the county, Madison Area Technical College, and the city. The city share will be about $10 million. The school district has asked for an early withdrawal of that residual. And the reason that they are interested in doing that is any sort of additional funding that the school district receives can affect their school aid payments from the state. And so they want to spread out that residual payment over a couple of years. So they want to have $7.5 million withdrawn this school year. Their fiscal year runs from July 1st of 2021 to June 30th of 2022. That'll require $16 million being withdrawn in 2021. The city's share of that's $5.9 million. So that's what you see in the 2021 chart here. And then in 2022 is the remaining $4.1 million for a total of $10 million from TID 25. So we have about $12.8 million in 2021 from the combination of the ARPA money for government services and TID 25, and then about $21.6 million in 2022. Available to address budget shortfalls, enterprise fund deficits, and things like that. So with that background, the mid-year appropriation, which again will be introduced at the end of August, will then go to the Finance Committee, I believe at your September 13th meeting, where we'll talk more about it, but this is just to give you a preview of it. The goals of this resolution are to keep the room tax fund in balance. As I mentioned earlier, the room tax collections are expected to fall $4 million short of projections. And so the goal of this is to keep the allocation amounts that were made for Monona Terrace, Overture, Destination Madison, and City Arts programs at the level that was approved by the Room Tax Commission for 2021. And then also to begin to restore that general fund balance, restore our rainy day fund, of which we are using $8 million for the 2021 budget. So like I said, room tax revenue is going to fall about a third short of projections. That general fund share is $1.2 million. The room tax fund also finished 2020 with a $1.8 million deficit. So that shortfall in the room tax fund, when you put all that together, is about $5.1 million by the end of 2021. And so what we'll do in this mid-year appropriation is, first of all, we had included in the 2021 budget what is allowed under state law, the maximum of 30% of room tax revenues being transferred to the general fund from room taxes. That same sort of foregoing of room tax revenues was also done in 2020 to help shore up the room tax fund. We'll also replace that sort of lost general fund revenues with ARPA dollars. And then we'll also be using that $5.9 million from TID 25, some of that to bring the room tax fund back into balance, some of which to bring Monona Terrace back into balance and restore some of their reserves. And so that's the actions. And again, we've laid that out in previous presentations to you back in May about use of the ARPA dollars. The table on the right-hand side of this slide just shows the various dollars and the effects within the general fund, the room tax fund, Monona Terrace, how much of the dollars are used from ARPA and TID 25. And then we also just look ahead to the year-end appropriation, which you will see in late November and December, of additional ARPA dollars to, again, help replenish our rainy day fund, kind of indirectly by using ARPA for already budgeted city costs. So the total that we're allocating in 2021 will be the $6.9 million. That was the plan all along, is to use $6.9 million of that first amount of ARPA money for government services and $5.9 million from the TID money. And then what's left over is about $17.5 million for 2022 and 4.1 from ARPA and 4.1 million from TID 25. So that's a lot, but that's the outline of what you'll see in that mid-year appropriation adjustment resolution. And we will talk more about this in September. I'll just walk through quickly some of the key capital budget dates. So that is coming up quickly with the executive capital budget being introduced at the end of August. We are overall with the budget setting up a presentation on the budget process either later this month or early in September. So we can talk through with you council member roles in budget hearings, how the amendment process works, how to put an amendment together. And we will have that meeting before the budget hearings begin in September. At the August 31st meeting, the mid-year appropriation will be introduced, as will the executive capital budget. And then on September 13th and 14th, the Finance Committee meets to hear from the agencies on the capital budget for each of them. And then the next week is when amendments on the capital budget are put together for the Finance Committee meeting, which occurs on the 27th, and the Finance Committee meets and votes on amendments. And all council members can participate in that process, and that's what we'll cover in more detail with this budget learning session that we're trying to put together sometime either in late August or early September. All right, so that's a lot. I will stop sharing and see if there are any questions.
Thanks, Dave. Questions for Dave? Alder Curry.
Thank you, Mayor. Dave, in regards to the fire, I may have gotten this wrong, but I thought we were expecting revenue coming in from the attachment of the town of Madison.
Right. The city did receive about $800,000 to $900,000 for the fire services and EMS and building inspection contract with the town. That revenue has already been built into the 2021 budget. So it's already been accounted for, and the deficit in fire is within their appropriation. They're spending more than what was budgeted in the fire department for spending. The revenue goes to the general fund for that contract.
Thank you.
Other questions for Dave? Right, not seeing any other questions. We'll look forward to that additional session, Dave, for alders. Thank you for doing that. And that brings us to the end of our agenda. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
To adjourn.
I think I'll take that as Alder Curry moving and President Abbas seconding. To adjourn, is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor of adjournment? Seeing no objection, we are adjourned. Have a good rest of your evening, everyone.